I want to show you something that sits in the Topkapi Palace library in Istanbul. It is a map fragment drawn by an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis in 1513. What it shows should not be impossible. The map is drawn on gazelle parchment. It measures 87 centimeters by 63 centimeters. Fragile, ancient. And according to a 1960 letter from a U.S. Air Force officer, this map depicts a coastline that was not officially discovered until 1958. Not South America, not Africa, Antarctica, the continent that sits at the bottom of the world, locked beneath a mile of ice. The letter came from a man named Harold Ohlmeyer. He had spent months studying this map. He wrote that the geographical detail shown in the lower part of the map agrees remarkably with the seismic profile results made across the top of the ice cap by the Swedish, British, Norwegian Antarctic expedition of 1949. He added that we have no idea how the data on this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographical knowledge in 1513. That question has not stopped echoing for 65 years. But the truth about Piri Reis's map is far more complicated than a simple impossibility. It is a story about a remarkable man, about how knowledge traveled across empires, and about how a genuine historical artifact became wrapped in a legend that both obscures and illuminates what it actually shows. Let me tell you who Piri Reis was. He was born around 1470 in Gallipoli on the shore of the Ottoman Empire. His uncle was a corsair and naval commander named Kemal Reis, one of the most feared maritime powers of the eastern Mediterranean. For 14 years, Piri Reis apprenticed under his uncle. He learned navigation, he learned cartography, he learned how to read the sea. When Kemal Reis died in 1511, Piri Reis had already spent a decade and a half becoming something rare, a man fluent in both Ottoman naval power and the technical art of mapping. In 1513, he sat down in Gallipoli and compiled his first world map. He was explicit about his sources. He did not claim ancient knowledge. He claimed he had synthesized approximately 20 different source maps. 8 of them traced back to Ptolemy, the ancient geographer. 1 was an Arabic map of India. 4 were freshly drawn by Portuguese explorers returning from the New World. And 1 was a map from Christopher Columbus, a map that was otherwise lost to history. In the margins of the parchment, Piri Reis wrote his own annotations. He wrote charts drawn in the days of Alexander. He dated the fragment to the Islamic year 919, which is 1513 by the Christian calendar. He was creating a synthesis. He was combining medieval Islamic cartography, contemporary European exploration, and Ottoman naval knowledge into a single artifact. What Piri Reis created was revolutionary for its time. It was not the most accurate map of the 16th century, but it was ambitious. It tried to show the known world as one integrated chart. And because of this, his map preserves something invaluable, evidence of Columbus's own voyage map, a document that would otherwise have vanished from history. The map was lost after his death in Cairo in 1554. For nearly 400 years, it sat buried and forgotten in the Ottoman palace archives. Then, on October 9, 1929, a German scholar named Gustav Adolf Deissmann was cataloging old documents in the Topkapi Palace library. He was searching for non-Islamic materials, a project funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. He found a disregarded bundle of parchment maps. Inside was Piri Reis's world map. By 1931, word had spread. A German Orientalist named Paul Kale presented the discovery to the Congress of Orientalists in Leiden. Kale identified the map, he noted the Columbus connection, and he published his findings internationally. The artifact had re-entered the world. For the next 25 years, scholars studied the map with growing fascination. Then, in 1956, a man named Charles Hapgood read about it. Hapgood was an American college professor and author. He had been developing a theory that seemed impossible on its surface, that the Earth's outer crust occasionally slips around its core, like the skin of an orange, rotating separately from the fruit inside. This crustal displacement, Hapgood argued, had happened multiple times in Earth's history. The most recent shift, he proposed, occurred around 9,600 BCE. It lasted only 48 hours, but in those 2 days, the entire geographic pole moved 15 degrees. If that were true, Hapgood reasoned, then there would be a narrow window in Earth's history when Antarctica was ice-free. And if an ancient civilization possessed sophisticated maritime technology, they could have mapped that ice-free coast before the pole shifted back. The map would show modern coastlines that should not have been mapped until the 20th century. Hapgood spent 3 years analyzing the Piri Reis Map. He worked with mathematicians to understand its projections. He identified its center point at ancient Syene, near Giza. He concluded that the map used plane trigonometry, a sophisticated mathematical approach for the 16th century. He found that the southern portion of the map, the contested section, matched the profile of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica with what seemed like impossible precision. In 1958, Hapgood published a book called Earth's Shifting Crust. And then something extraordinary happened. Albert Einstein, just months before his death, wrote a foreword to the book. Einstein called the crustal displacement theory astonishing and fascinating. He wrote that it deserves the serious attention of anyone who concerns himself with the theory of the Earth's development. Einstein's foreword was not an endorsement of the Piri Reis Map specifically, but in the popular imagination it became one. Combined with Ohlmeyer's letter and Hapgood's analysis, the narrative took shape. An Ottoman admiral in 1513 had drawn a map of a continent that should not have been mapped. The proof sat in Istanbul, protected by the Turkish government. Ancient knowledge had survived in plain sight. The story was too compelling to die. For 4 decades, Hapgood's theory dominated popular discussions of the Piri Reis Map. It appeared in bestsellers about lost civilizations. It circulated through academic and popular circles. The myth became more famous than the map itself. Then, in 2000, a historian named Gregory McIntosh published an exhaustive study that dismantled everything Hapgood had constructed. What McIntosh discovered was both mundane and illuminating. The southern section of the Piri Reis Map was not Antarctica. It was South America. Specifically, it was Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, distorted and rotated approximately 90 degrees. When McIntosh performed a rigorous cartographic analysis, he found that the alleged Antarctic coastline matched the actual southern tip of South America only when it was rotated, stretched, and when gaps were filled with imaginary extensions where Piri Reis lacked information. The map's distortion was not evidence of ancient knowledge. It was evidence of the problem Piri Reis faced in 1513. He had access to fragmentary Portuguese maps of the New World. He had Columbus's map, incomplete. He had no comprehensive knowledge of how far south the Americas extended, so he extrapolated. He extended the coastline. He created a landmass that looked like it might curve around to the bottom of the world. This is what cartographers did in the 16th century. They synthesized fragmentary sources. They filled gaps with reasonable guesses. The map was an honest attempt to integrate the newest geographic knowledge available to him. McIntosh went further. He examined every claim Hapgood had made about specific correspondences. The alleged match between Piri Reis's southern coast and Queen Maud Land's subglacial topography, when subjected to rigorous point-by-point comparison, fell apart. Yes, Ohlmeyer had noted similarities in 1960, but Ohlmeyer had worked with seismic data from only a small portion of Antarctica, collected during the 1949 expedition. He had not had access to comprehensive Antarctic surveys. As those surveys accumulated over the next decades, no significant correspondence emerged. The geological case was equally decisive. The Antarctic ice sheet did not form yesterday. It formed 34 million years ago. For 34 million years, it has remained. There are no credible geologists or paleoclimatologists who support the hypothesis that Antarctica was ice-free at any point in the last 10,000 years. Hapgood's crustal displacement theory, which would have been required to make the story work, has been decisively rejected by modern geophysics. There is no mechanism by which it could occur. There is no evidence that it did. And yet, and this is what fascinates me, McIntosh's refutation, complete and scholarly though it was, did not answer all the questions about the Piri Reis Map, because the genuine mysteries remain untouched by the Antarctic hypothesis. Piri Reis claimed to have used approximately 20 source maps. Some of these sources he attributed to the era of Alexander the Great. That attribution was likely confused. Medieval Islamic scholars often attributed maps to Alexander as a prestige marker when they actually meant Ptolemy or even contemporary sources. But the question persists, where exactly did Piri Reis get his information about the Americas? He had the Columbus map, certainly. He also had Portuguese charts from the early explorations of the Indian Ocean and Asia. His map shows knowledge that would not become public in Europe for years. How did an Ottoman corsair in Gallipoli have access to the latest Portuguese exploration data? The answer is simpler and more interesting than lost ancient knowledge. Piri Reis commanded corsairs. The Ottomans captured Spanish and Portuguese vessels constantly during these years. Those ships carried maps. Those maps were studied, copied, and integrated into Ottoman cartography. The Piri Reis map is not evidence of a lost prehistoric civilization. It is evidence of Ottoman naval intelligence networks working precisely as they should have. And that is the genuine achievement of Piri Reis. Not that he mapped a continent before modern discovery, but that he synthesized diverse sources into a unified chart. He preserved information that would otherwise have been lost, including the partial record of Columbus's own mapping. He demonstrated that in the early 16th century, knowledge was traveling across empires rapidly. Turkish cartographers had access to Portuguese exploration data almost as soon as it arrived in Europe. The Piri Reis Map sits in Istanbul as a document of how knowledge moved, a record of what happened when Ottoman, Islamic, and European cartographic traditions intersected, and a preserved fragment of Columbus's lost work. These are genuine mysteries worth studying. The Antarctic hypothesis was a distraction, beautiful and compelling, but a distraction nonetheless. The map has far more to teach us if we stop asking it to be ancient and start asking what it reveals about how medieval and Renaissance cartography actually worked. Piri Reis died in Cairo in 1554. He never knew his map would survive. He never knew that 400 years later people would study it as if it held the secrets of a lost world. His map is a lost world in a sense, a lost world of Ottoman navigation, of early exploration, of knowledge networks that predated the European dominance of cartography. That world is worth knowing, not because it contains impossible secrets, but because it contains the truth about how knowledge actually moved through the early modern world. The map still waits in Istanbul, protected, preserved, and finally understood.